So we're getting back and we're starting with the second portion of today. And I'm going to introduce Julian, who's going to take us through blended learning and make the link between reinvention and blended learning. Can you please give him a warm welcome?
Thanks, Sisipo. Okay, I hope that the wine helps with my English. Sometimes it makes it better. Let's see. Let's see. Yeah, for both of us. So sorry for my English, but I'll try my very best. Yeah, we had a really interesting start with the reinvention topic. The second part is about learning and development, and especially about blended learning. And I think we learned a lot why moving to the reinvention part is very important. And now I want to focus a little bit, okay, how can we actually move our organization, move the people in our organization from hopefully not the sinking Titanic, but maybe from firefighting or blind idealism into the reinvention part. So it's actually about developing a culture and training and empowering your employees. To do that, I want to travel a little bit back in time into end of 2019, so around about 3 years when we founded Trudy. And we founded Trudy with one main question in our minds, and that was the question, how will the future of organizational learning look like? And to do that, we had actually a look on the big topics that are out there. So I will do that very briefly because I'm pretty sure you know about that, and we had a look on how the world is rapidly changing in the first part. So one thing we learned it in the reinvention part, it is, okay, the world is changing so fast. So we had, I think it was 6 years, if I remember it correctly, between starting a company and declining again. And actually last year there was a report from the World Economic Forum saying that by the year of 2025, 50% of jobs will change. So there's a massive need for upskilling and for reskilling. Therefore, first conclusion was, okay, we need to be able to scale our training and our development measures. Second thing, the density of work is increasing. I think we know it all. We're doing more in less time, and therefore it's getting harder to justify to be out for a full day or 2 days or even 3 days of training. So we actually need more flexible training solutions in order to fit into our very tight schedules. Third thing was individual learning needs. So again, if we look at our private lives, we're using Netflix, we're using Spotify. So we are deciding on what content we want to consume, and we're not relying on a TV channel or radio anymore. So why should we spend time on topics or content that are not important for us? Why should we learn at a time which is not suitable for us? So we need individual learning, which is tailored to the needs of each learner. And last thing, well, about 3 months after we founded Trudy, there was something happening. The global pandemic started, and that accelerated the amount of remote work and the acceptance of remote work. So actually, if we don't have to come to the office, do we need to come to the office to learn? So these were the main things we had in mind when we thought about how will learning and development change over the next years. And coming from traditional learning, so we're a sister company of Contract, we started with looking at the status quo. So what are the pros and what are the cons of traditional learning? As we learned before, it's not only about looking at the future, then we are in blind idealism, but also looking at what do we have right now and what is working for us right now. So traditional learning, from my understanding, that's live training. So everything that's happening in a group where we're learning simultaneously. So it can be in person, can be virtual, but it's live. And there are a lot of good things about that. So first of all, we have a high control over the learning process. So the trainer can speed it up, slow it down, adjust the agenda to what the person or the learners in the group need. Also, we have the social contact, which for many people is a source of motivation. And if done right, we can co-create, we can learn collaboratively, so we actually can learn from each other and ideate together. And it's widely accepted. So there is something positive of coming together in a room, maybe having some wine, having some good conversation, having dinner together. So there's a lot of positive things, and often it's seen as a reward by the learners. However, if we look at how the world is changing, there are some, well, things which make it difficult to just continue traditional learning as we did before. So first of all, it's time consuming. As I said before, spending a whole day, 2 days, 3 days away from work. And also it's hard to individualize. So I'm learning at the speed of the group. So this can slow my learning process down. Also, maybe there's content that's not relevant for me, or things I know already. So that's also keeping me back. We have additional costs like travel expenses, accommodation, room fees, and so on and so forth. And it's hard to scale, especially if you want to scale it fast, let's say, for a whole organization worldwide. So there's a couple of things which are a challenge. So what we did next was we've been looking at digital learning. So the first thing we did at Trudy was developing our own digital learning platform. Because in digital learning, we also saw some positive things. So first of all, it's scalable. So we can roll out for a whole organization at the same time, even in different languages. So we can reach like a broad audience. We have flexibility. The learners can learn anytime, any place. You can learn at work, while commuting, after work, at the weekend, what fits your schedule best. And that's the one good thing, we can actually individualize the learning paths. So we can pre-select the content, we can make an assessment, see what is necessary for one person and maybe not necessary for the other person. So we can create individual needs-based learning paths regarding the needs of each learner. And what is really interesting is that for the first time, we can really get valuable data. So with our learning platform, we can see what trainings are requested, we can see how much time learners spend on each learning, and we can also see the questions that they're asking. So we can get like lifetime data on what is happening in an organization right now. So there's a lot of good reasons for digital learning. But while starting with digital learning at Trudy, we saw also some challenges popping up. So the main conclusion or the main thing that came up for us was digital learning depends on the maturity of the learner. So the learners need to self-organize. They need to motivate themselves. They need to stay on track, volition. So we actually ask a lot from the learners. So, and we don't have the control as we have it in a classroom training. Also, there's a risk of low engagement and low commitment. And I like the phrase of any time can easily become another time, especially if we are in a work environment which is very dense. So there are like other priorities coming in, and then it's really hard to defend our learning times. So I know that from myself, probably you experienced that as well. And there's like one interesting statistics. So when it comes to the use of massive open online courses, so courses that people actually buy, they pay money for it, what do you think, what are the completion rates of a massive open online course? Give me some wild guess. How much percent?
30, 40%.
30, 40%? 20? 13? Yeah? 30. Okay. So there's studies showing that it's between 5 to 8% finishing rate for courses people paid their hard-earned money for. So I think that is showing quite strongly that there is a problem regarding commitment. Another problem is the choice overload. So if I go online, there's a lot of things to choose from. There's maybe 50, maybe 100, maybe even more courses on a specific topic. If I go, for example, on Udemy or Coursera and look for a specific topic, there's tons of courses popping up. How do I know which is the right one for me? So psychology shows the more choices I have, the harder it is to make a choice. And when I chose one, maybe there's something better out there. So it's really hard to actually pick the right course for yourself. And last point, many people say, okay, I'm missing the social exchange. It's good for knowledge acquisition. I learn stuff. I get inspiration from like watching a TED Talk, but I'm missing the connection to other people, the reflection, the practical application. So the next step, what we did was, okay, we see the positive sides from classic traditional learning. We see the positive sides of digital learning. Let's try to bring them together. And that's the idea from blended learning, what we do in blended learning. So the idea is that we use digital learning programs where people can work on any place, anytime, in their own speed, and then we combine it with practical live sessions facilitated by a trainer. So we have the positive sides from the one and the positive sides from the other. And the topic of commitment and engagement, we're tackling this through two things. So first of all, we use the social effect, so the groups effect, by creating cohorts. So we have a small group, usually 6 to 8 people. We bring them together for a kickoff. So they get to know each other, they commit on the learning journey. Then they go learn on their own, but then they meet again in the group. And this actually, well, you could also call it social pressure, because it helps more if you commit to others. You know that from like having a gym buddy or whatever. Like if you commit to others, you're more likely to continue what you committed to. The other thing is have a clearly defined learning path with clear deadlines. That's very important to tackle the topic of any time can become another time. So we have a clear kickoff, and for each module, which consists of self-learning and live sessions, we have a clear time frame which has to be kept. And when we do that, we still can scale. It's easier to scale because most of the live sessions we're doing are virtual, and they're much shorter than a traditional learning setup, and it's more cost efficient. So, is blended learning the best of two worlds? Is this the holy grail of learning? I would say it depends. Very psychological answer. I'm a psychologist, so I never say yes, I say it depends. So from what we've learned, it works, first of all, if you pre-select the right content. That's super important. So you need to find out what the learners want, what they actually need, and then you make a pre-selection. Because if you go out there and say, okay, here's like 100 great learning programs, have fun with that, it won't work. So you have to provide the right content, and you have to curate it. So you have to put it into a storyline, and you have to tell, and you have to sell this storyline. Second thing, which is very important, is to find the right balance between self-responsibility and between guidance. And that depends a lot on the maturity of the organization and the maturity of each learner. So whenever we do a blended learning project with organizations, we are quite critical and asking a lot of questions on, okay, how mature are your people in your organization regarding self-learning? The more mature they are, the more self-responsibility. The less mature, the more guidance, the more structure you need. And one very important learning we made throughout our projects, you need to constantly activate and motivate the learners. We have that fast-paced environment, and there's like a lot of things like shouting for attention. And if we don't fight for the attention of the learner, they will not do it. So that's why it's so important when it comes to blended learning and digital learning, is to communicate that there is a learning journey happening and to constantly communicate that. And one thing we learned is you need the buy-in of the management. So for many organizations, we work with digital learning and blended learning were a new concept. And as it is a new concept, it's quite a change in an organization. And in order to make change work, you need role models. You need orientation. And that's why we try. We're not at the point where we do it in every project, but we try in every project to start with the top management, so that the top management does self-learning, and they talk about the self-learning, and they tell others about the digital learning program they did. Because if they do, it's more likely that the rest of the organization will do the same. And last point, it's very important to give the learners the time and the space to learn. If they're not able to defend their learning time against other obligations, they are not going to do it. So that's why, again, we need the buy-in of the management and especially of the leaders of the learners, that they have in mind that there is a learning journey going on and that they are allowed to create space and time for learning. Yes. Before we come to that, so what our perception is when it comes to learning and the future of learning, or what we think the future of learning is. We think there's many good reasons to do traditional learning setups, especially when it comes to creative workshops, when it comes to team development. There are many cases where it makes sense to come together in a room and ideate and think creatively together. There are also good reasons for digital learning. So whenever you want to build knowledge in your organization pretty fast, there's information you want to spread. Digital learning is a good way to do that, especially when it comes to education, knowledge acquisition. And when it comes to training new skills and developing a new mindset, from our experience, blended learning is a very good way to go. Okay. Now I would like to get a perspective from you guys in the room. So you can get out your phones and scan this QR code. We have a little questionnaire for you on Mentimeter with 2 questions. So I would like to hear from your side, how often do you use those 3 formats, traditional learning, digital learning, blended learning, in your organization right now? And then we talked about future orientation. I would also like to hear what you think, how will that ratio change within the next 5 years? Have a look at the results, but I would also like to get some insights from you.
We go the traditional because that's what we know and that's what most people offer. But we've seen with certain things like, for instance, the quality management, the ISO training, those things, they do a full online thing. But then we've gone, for instance, to the business school at Stellenbosch University that's blended. So our leadership and our management guys do the blended, but it's very new. The blended thing is a relatively new concept, but I personally think it works. It works great.
So you're trying it out? Yeah.
Yes. But traditional is still very nice. It's challenging because it kind of gives you the idea that you're going to be at home and you're going to be working at your own pace, and then these specific dates we have to meet up again and be in group, it does put a nice deadline to it and keeps you on it.
Cool. Thanks for sharing, Bernard.
Thank you.
Another idea. Yeah?
So
What's your name? Sorry?
Karabo from the Table Bay.
Okay.
So what we use more is traditional learning because we work on shift working employees. However, for our management, we push to do the blending learning because they get to see and to work within their time on planning. So that is working closely and very nicely for our management teams.
Yeah. So especially for the flexibility
For the
reasons.
for the flexibility reasons of them, and they are flexible at all times. So they need to work within their diary to ensure that they succeed within their learning.
Cool. Yeah. Thanks for sharing. Anybody else? Yeah.
Can share.
Yeah. Your name? Sorry.
Rashida.
Rashida. Yeah.
We used to have quite a high amount of traditional learning. I think that's with COVID that went largely digital, and I think I agree with you that certain leadership courses that need to have a combination. So we do a combination of blended and digital, but I think blended. But I think mostly it's shifting away from traditional to digital and blended.
Okay, interesting. So it's moving, but you're still like working a lot with traditional, but trying out things.
No, I
No,
think less
very
Less-
little
less-
traditional. In
less-
fact, our
okay.
traditional facilitators are being upskilled and reskilled and
Okay.
repurposed to do design work for blended and traditional and digital work.
Interesting.
Very
Yeah.
little traditional
Yeah.
work.
Cool. Thanks for
Our whole
sharing.
learning centers closed down, in fact,
Yeah.
in
Okay.
Johannesburg, because they
Okay.
don't
Yeah.
do classroom
Yeah.
anymore.
Cool. Thanks for sharing. Sorry, your name?
Andrew.
Andrew. Yeah.
Yeah, I think for us at the company that I work for, so we've moved, obviously because of COVID, we've moved into the blended learning. Because if I look at our landscape of our company, we have a lot of our people that sit in other countries. So yes, blended learning works well here, but then we have a lot of African countries where we find that the traditional way of doing training works better because of, a lot of challenges when it comes to Wi-Fi connectivity and things like that. So, so it's a bit of both that we are using. And then obviously we have our facilitators this side that's within South Africa that is doing the virtual training when it comes to management. So it depends. But I think for us, both works. And that's why we found the common ground in terms of the blended learning working for us better.
Okay. Yeah, that's one very important aspect which I didn't have in my presentation. You don't need only the time for the learners, but also the equipment and setup, and make them able to assess the digital learning programs or the virtual trainings. Yeah, definitely.
Thank you.
Cool, thanks. So we have very tight race here, but we see we have actually a mix of everything. So there's like, except of one organization, like everyone is using traditional learning to some extent. So we have a little bit more variance regarding digital learning from some organizations not using it, and some organizations using it a lot. And then blended is interesting because to me it looks like a little bit more like either or, like either not really or very much. Okay, very interesting. Okay, that's interesting. Okay, so we see clearly that there will be less traditional learning from your perspective. Somehow the same amount of digital learning as we have right now, a little bit more, but a clear shift into blended learning. I'm not sure if I primed you with the topic or the question that I had in mind, but yeah, very interesting. And it's the same perspective that we share, Julie, that we see. Actually, I would say maybe still a little bit more of traditional learning because there are some cases where it makes sense. Digital, also some cases where it makes sense, but blended definitely as a solution where we can take in the best of two worlds. So when we talk about blended learning, we talk about the combination of digital learning programs and live sessions. So what we did at Judy, we developed a portfolio of around about 100 learning programs, and we all produced them all by ourselves in Germany and here in Cape Town. And we choose from those learning programs those which are necessary or which are needed for a specific group. We combine them with the live sessions. As I said before, we work with small groups. So in the live sessions, we work with usually 6 to 8 people. And the really interesting thing is that most of the knowledge acquisition is happening in the learning programs. So in the live sessions, we go right into reflection, we go right into practical application. So it's actually a very condensed deep dive into a topic. What we also do is we get like quite a lot of data from our platform regarding how the learning programs are used, how much time the users spend on there. And as I said before, we see most of our projects in some kind as a change project. So what we focus a lot on is on the communication and the setting up of a blended learning project, because if you just say, okay, here's the content and here's the live sessions, have fun with that, that won't work. So you need the management all around that, the communication, the buy-in from the leadership. And to give you a little bit more practical insights on how it looks like, I have, in short, one overview about one program we did with Sensonic. Sensonic is an Austria-based company, very techy. and with them we did leadership development for their leaders. So we had 4 modules: communication, leading individuals, developing teams, and facilitating change. So like basic leadership knowledge. And what we did, and you can see it on this side here, is we created different modules, and each module consisted of self-learning with the learning program and then a facilitated live session. And in total, it was like 5 months of leadership development, 8 learning programs, 7 live sessions, and all that was structured by what we call email nurturing. So we use automated emails in order to remind the learners of the learning journey they're in, send them like reminders of, okay, a live session is coming up, but we also send them micro content, some further information regarding the topics we have in the learning program. And by doing that, as you can see from the numbers, users were quite happy with 4.4 star rating out of 5. And we were also quite happy with the finishing rates. That for now. So we have a common base when we talk about blended learning, and now I'm really curious to get into discussion. So Phil, I invite you over, and Sisipo. So the idea now is that we share some ideas, some questions, and please share your critical questions as well on the blended learning.
All right, everyone. So we're having sort of a panel discussion, just asking questions to our presenters, to our speakers. I'm going to kick it off so we get the conversation going. So anything that's been burning in your heart and in your mind, any curiosity, please just jump at it. But I'll start us off with a question or two, just to get Phil and Julian speaking. So I've got one question, but okay. Let me start. One question that both applies to reinvention and digital and the blended learning space, and it's what's the biggest misconception that people have around blended learning and digital learning? And even to you, Phil, what's the biggest misconception that people have when they hear reinvention? And anyone can start.
Crikey, it's a good question, not an easy answer. Biggest misconception when it comes to reinvention, I think it's that it's a one-off thing. If I do it now, it's fine forever. But it's like having a shower. If you don't have a shower, you stink after a while. And if you don't keep doing it, then your business is in trouble or you're in trouble. So I think it's about making sure that you smell nice and keep showering every single day. And that is the biggest misconception, that you can, it's fine, I can leave it for a bit. You'll soon get caught out. That's mine.
All right. Before you go, Julian, and I've got something I've seen on one of the presentations. You had, not this one, but before, you've had change is not equal to reinvention.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
So reinvention is creating a system that supports ongoing change. And sometimes that's not about change, actually. Sometimes it's about just being stable for a while, to kind of consolidate. Because it's not constant change, it's about doing it in small sprints.
Yeah.
And that encapsulates reinvention, that cycle of change and stabilization, that's reinvention. Change is just the half of that loop.
Okay, thank you.
Cool.
Julian, over to you.
Yeah, I'm lucky I had more time to think about the question. I would say that people think that blended learning is shallow or is not as deep as especially traditional in-person training. And maybe we will cover that a little bit more, especially when we look at your experience with the live session, Phil. But what we hear from participants is that they actually like a lot that in the live session they can go more in depth than in a traditional training, because everyone has the knowledge. So you go in there and you can, like, with your full energy, you can work on case studies, on things that are on your mind. So it actually helps you to go really deep into topics.
All right. I'll throw to the crowd. I saw a hand at the back.
Yeah, thanks. I wanted to ask, do you guys find it difficult with the generational gap? The the older guys. We've seen some of the guys today here batting to get the Moodle thing going there, or the voting. It's just the younger guys take easier to this than the older guys, and the higher educated people versus the blue collars and the white collars. Do you find some guys are more susceptible to this and open to this, and other guys just go, sorry, I'm too old to learn and I can't do the tech stuff?
Yeah. So I wouldn't say it's age. So I think it depends. I will use the term maturity again, and there might be a correlation between age and maturity regarding self-organized learning, but we see big differences, and it may be correlated with age, but not such a strong correlation, I would say. But we see big differences in organizations. So there are organizations where learning has been a priority for quite some time, and we don't have to do much there. So if they see the content is actually valuable for them, they are on it, they're doing it. So that's pretty easy for us. It's getting more difficult if it's an organization where learning is not one of the core values. And maybe learning in the past was not as helpful as before. And yes, there might be some correlation that we have like people who've been in an organization for quite some time. They are like, yeah, we had that, heard that 1,000 of times. I don't need to reinvent, or I don't need to learn new stuff. So there we need to do the convincing part and actually get them on board. Second question was regarding qualification. I would say it's maybe an upside down U curve. So actually, like with like blue collar workers, yeah, we need to work more on that to actually get them activated, get them motivated, speak their language also, to not look like too academic, too high level, but actually that's why we produce learning programs also for certain specific focus groups. So I think that's important, to actually speak the language of the audience you want to reach. The other difficulty again is top management, because they don't have, they think they don't need it, or they think they don't have enough time. But actually, funny enough, there's like, even on basic trainings as like communication, I think there's a lot also top management can learn and reflect on. So yeah, I would say it's that curve. But if you aim at the focus group and you have that in mind, who you want to reach in the learning programs, but also in the communication around it, because that's much easier to change than to produce a whole new learning program. That helps a lot by addressing the audience. Phil?
I think if you can access YouTube on the internet, then you can use these digital programs. And how many people, blue, white collar, ages, use that? You can even access it on your phone. So it is simple. It is easy to use. Simple stuff. Even I can use it. And I'm one of those upper age demographics. So I think we shouldn't stereotype and just take people at face value, talk to them and understand what their needs are, their skill level is, and their challenges are, and then try and work with that to bring something that works for them.
It's not about trust.
I think often people get engaged with organizations, take people on the journey to learn for results, and people trust in the journey that they'll get the results and they put the effort in. But if they don't get the rewards, then it gets more difficult the next time to get them engaged. So a lot of corporates dangle, the fruit and say, we need you all on this journey to do this, and everybody does it, but then they don't see the implementation, or they don't see the results. And then it becomes more difficult to get people to do it again. I think it's less about the process of doing it and more about what is in it for the people at the end. Results driven.
Yeah, I can't agree more, and I didn't bribe you, but Trudy actually is an acronym and stands for trust, development, and inspiration, because we think those are the three elements which are very essential when it comes to learning and the future of learning. So yeah, couldn't agree more on how important trust is when it comes to learning and development.
Thank you. I have two questions, two vastly different questions. We more from a secondary education background, which obviously it's not necessarily related when it comes to the type of courses or tied to a curriculum. So my first question is, what type of support or mentoring do you provide to the learners on this learning journey, specifically remotely? And what prompted my question is a colleague recently completed a course at a different organization, and ironically the course was about remote learning and how support must be provided in remote learning, and 3 weeks into the course she hadn't received any support or feedback from a mentor. So what kind of support do you offer?
Yeah. Shall I start on that?
Yeah, you start.
Yeah. So I would see two different types of support. So first of all, I would say the support on the content of the learning program or the learning journey. And what we recommend, and we do in almost all of our programs, is we have a joint kickoff. So there's a kickoff in person at the very beginning of each learning journey with the trainer present who's going to lead the people through their blended learning journey. So a lot of questions can be tackled there. And also the trainer is available for the group the whole time, just as in an in-person training as well. So we rely a lot on that close relationship between the learner and the trainer, and we have that small groups of 6 to 8 people, so it's a very good ratio on that. The other thing is, I would say, all the technical stuff, and therefore we have a 24 hours live support. So we have a chat which people can use on their phone or on their computer, and so usually like our response rate is between 2 hours, depends on what time zone the users are in, but actually we are replying really fast on any issues, if there are any, with the usage of the learning programs.
Yeah, I think for me the kind of support is there in the live sessions. Any participants have, if I'm doing the live session, they have my email address, so they can contact me. And they do, not always, but they do, if they've got questions or if they're not sure about stuff. And in the actual live sessions, they have support from me, who's facilitating it, but also they build support in that group of people. So they have support in the organization. So that what you find is that group of people who are brought together, some may know each other, but sometimes it's a bit random. You know, they might not know each other. Sometimes they're not even in the same country. And the Sensonic one that Julian described there was one I was involved in, and there was people based in the UK and India and Austria, and they kind of build a little group, and they as kind of a peer network that they didn't have before, so that and that's much stronger and much more available, and actually much more beneficial because those guys are in the same organization, they understand their own challenges. So it comes in a couple of ways.
And you had a second question, right? Yeah.
And that really, I think it speaks to the point of trust that is built along that journey, which is quite cool. The second question is related to content. And in your data collection, lots of data points on online learning, have you come across any learning barriers? And is that perhaps addressed in your content and the way that content is developed, designed, a balance between text and images and stuff like that?
Yeah, so that's a very good question, and I was responsible for the content that we created on the platform. So we put a lot of thought on that. So, and again, I will relate it to the trust topic. So what we thought is, okay, what is important in traditional learning is that you have a connection to the one who's presenting you the knowledge or who's working with you. So that's why our learning programs are based a lot on video content. And we don't use actors, but we use real experts. So that was very important for us. So experts on a specific topic who present the content in the video. That's mainly for presenting the knowledge or acquiring the knowledge. But we also wanted to bring in this aspect of reflection and application, and therefore we created worksheets. And usually, like our learning programs, they are usually 2.5 to 3.5 hours of self-learning. And 1 hour of this is through video material, and the other 1.5 to 2.5 hours is through self-reflection with worksheets, with reflection questions, and some gamification elements to spice it up. So these are the 3 main elements. We have the videos, we have the reflection worksheets and handouts, and we have the gamification elements to bring in some more variety.
And the guys who I work with really like the fact that the video, it's not an hour of video.
No.
It's like, it's chunked up. So like
Yeah.
5 to 10 minutes, short bite-sized stuff. So they can jump into it for 10 minutes, 15 minutes in their workday, and then something crops up and they can pause it. So it's a bit like watching Netflix. You can pause it and come back to it.
Yeah.
You're not going to miss anything. So it really is on demand, and they can fit it into a really busy schedule. And that's what the guys I've been working with over the last year or so, that's what they really like, because life is busy.
It's true.
So one learning program consists usually out of 10 chapters, and each chapter is like 20 minutes of work. And the video is usually, we try to keep it between 5 to 6 minutes, because that's the attention span.
Yeah. There's another question there.
Hi, maybe to touch on both topics, learning and reinvention. We've seen how the business cycle has reduced so drastically from sort of 60 years to 15 to 6. And I think the same is happening with learning. We've got traditional learning for so long, and then we move to video-based learning and digital learning. And now very much blended learning is popular. What's next? What are the future trends we need to look out for?
I wish I was sure on that, because as Phil stated at the very beginning, it's not so easy to foresee how the future will look like. So there's different trends which are interesting from my perspective. So I think one trend is into micro-learning. So right now we have like learning programs which are curated, but they last 2.5 to 3 hours. But more and more organizations are also going into the trend of micro-learning. We want like a library of micro content. We don't want a full learning program on, let's say, communication, which lasts 3 hours, but I want content, for example, how do I do a feedback conversation in 10 minutes? How do I do an interview in 15 minutes? So that trend in direction of micro learning, I think, is very interesting.
And I'm starting one tomorrow. So kick off tomorrow. One video journey, one live session, done. So that would be over in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, done. Rather than like 4 or 5 minutes. So there's kind of tailor it to the audience. I don't know about how micro learning.
Yeah. So micro learning, I think, is one important topic. The other topic is user generated content, but there you always have you also have to find the balance, like how important is the quality of the content? Do you want it like nicely produced with a good storyline and like all the nice things around it? Then you go for quite professional production, or do you want it like created by the people out of the organization, so you actually don't produce the content for them, but you consult them and help them produce the content on their own? So that's also a good question. So for us, we're trying to tackle that by actually including the perspectives of the organization while creating learning programs. We have the email nurturing, where we bring in topics which are relevant for the organization, and we have the live sessions where we can focus on the topics of the learners. But I think that's one big question. How much do you want like professionally produced content, or how much do you want to empower your organization to create their own content? And Phil.
I think I also think one of the other things to bear in mind is as we were talking about in reinvention, you're not sure about what's coming up in the future. Mm-hmm. Take experiments, try things out. It might work, and if it works, go with it. If it doesn't work, then bin it quickly and move on. And I think you've been doing quite a lot of that. And you're trying different things, seeing what works, going with it. If it doesn't work, we'll try something else. And just over time, then you really get a sense of what the audience wants.
Oh, there's a question there, and then
Okay, so I've got a question. So from a 2D perspective, is this platform compatible from an API integration perspective? So if you look at your human resource platforms or softwares that the companies are using, you sometimes find that you have these platforms, but then you can't really plug it into a HR management system or whatever the case may be. Do you guys do that? And do you deal with the development of it as well? Because sometimes you find organizations, they don't know how to do it, so they want to just buy something off the shelf, but then you find that it doesn't really speak to their in-house systems.
Yeah, yeah. That's a tech question, and I'm not a techie, but I can try to answer it. So actually there's two options right now what we're using. So one is we use our platform, and then we usually link out from the platform of the organization using an API. So it's like a one-click thing. You come to our platform, you do it all on our platform, and then it goes back. What we still are not having is a full integration regarding the backend. So like transferring all the information on the learning process and stuff like that. It's possible, but it's a lot of development work. So it depends if it makes sense to do it or not. So as far as I know, we just do the link out, and then it's on our platform, but we do not do the full integration. The other possibility that's out there is using SCORM. So what we can do is all our learning programs can be hosted on our platform, but we can also hand them over as a SCORM file, so it can be included into the LMS of the organization, which is nice for the organization because they have it all in one place, which is not so nice regarding the look and feel of the learning program, because I have to say it because it's our platform, but I feel like the usability of our platform is better. And also we cannot provide our customer then with the information that we could gather on our platform. So if we are to choose, we always recommend using it on our platform, because then the user experience is usually better, and we can provide them with data and information to actually make the learning project successful.
I have, I think, a thought, but a question as well. You spoke about the future of learning, and you didn't mention gamification. And I'm quite curious to know, like, what the stats is on that, because I know that some companies use gamification in their functional development, but also I know that you can use gamification in a way like where the pupil becomes an avatar or a sim, and then you kind of are having this digital interactive space. And I'm interested to know, will it ever get there?
So I guess that's more a personal opinion from my side. Maybe I will be completely wrong and people will laugh on that in like 10 years, but I don't see a big relevance, for example, regarding metaverse in learning right now. I would say it's still too early to do that. So we have to see. But from my perspective, but that's very personal, I say there were things like Second Life out there. I don't know, who remembers Second Life? See, that was some kind of metaverse which was created like 10, 15 years ago, where like companies build up like big malls and everything, and now nobody uses it anymore. So right now, my perspective right now is I don't see the relevance. Maybe it will change, maybe it will become more important, but so I don't see a metaverse or avatars as that important. When it comes to gamification in general, I would say also it depends. So regarding the target group that we're having, which is mainly leadership development and people development in organizations, we see it as one part of the journey to make it a bit more interesting, to also give some feedback on what people have learned, but we see it as one element of the whole big thing. There may be use cases, especially if we're talking about education, for example, where it may be more important in order to motivate learners, but for us, it's not crucial. It's one part, but it's not the most important thing.
Are there any more questions, comments, any skepticism in the room? Anything? Okay, if not, I'll throw one more question to the both of you again. And it's not necessarily a question, but a reflection, you know, on some of the things you've spoken about. And I think just one big learning, one aha, you know, because there was a point in time where you were not a CRP. There was a point in time where you were not necessarily a specialist or, you know, a professional in your area. But what's been one big learning? And I think I'm going to give it to Julian so that Phil can have time to think this time.
Yeah. Actually, maybe now I'm primed from what we did at the very beginning, but there's never a final product of what we're doing. So, and sometimes you learn it the hard way. So I think we're now in the third iteration of how our learning programs look like. And when it comes to the content in the reflection materials, it's quite easy to do that again. When it comes to the videos, it's quite a lot of work. So, but it's also very, very interesting to see like where we started 3 years ago and how it looks now. And now I'm really happy with that. At the same time, I know I'm very sure in 2 years it will look different again. So I think that's one big learning for myself, especially moving from like a trainer and consultant, more so service delivery, more to a field where we actually produce a product, that there is a permanent beta. There's never the final version of it. And yeah, that's one thing that I learned for sure in the last 3 years.
Amazing.
Stole my answer. But I think for me, it's don't try to be perfect. In a very changeable world, that's a dangerous thing to try to be. So I think it's just try things out. Keep trying things out. What works, maybe go with, but be open to changing it and trying new things as well. So that's the thing I've learned kind of more recently. Somebody asked earlier on, is it personality based? I get bored quite quickly as well, so that helps. You know, kind of going with that. You know, I don't need to do the same thing forever. But yeah, that's mine.
Thank you.
I'm going to piggyback off his question about the content. So I know that if you look at Udemy and you look at LinkedIn, when it comes to, you know, your modules and things like that, how do you keep up to date in terms of, remember, things change every day. So I know the modules and stuff that you create, it's there and it's there for a certain period of time. But then tomorrow, your content is outdated because something else came in. How do you keep your finger on the pulse in terms of constantly changing your videos and your information that's on the system? Because in comparison with Udemy and LinkedIn, the one is more updated than the other one, as where the other ones still have old stuff there. So, yeah.
We're lucky that we can outsource most of this work to our trainers. So we rely on a network of trainers and experts in the field of people and organizational development. Because, as I said before, we have 100 learning programs. We can't be, like Trudy is 12 people right now. We can't be experts on all those topics. So we rely on experts to do that. Also, we're focusing on evergreen content. Doesn't really sound sexy, but we try to create content which is valid over a period of time. So if we look, for example, at communication, we work with models. I don't know, you work a lot with transactional analysis. I think it's out there since the 70s. Which is really old, but still it works pretty well. At the same time, there are new topics coming up where we see, okay, that's something which is important, which, for example, right now, especially in Europe, we're facing an economic crisis, which is just starting. So that is making us think, okay, what do organizations need in this case? What do they need in order to prepare their workforce for what is happening? So, and that's why it's helpful also that we have those live sessions where the trainers have conversations with the learners, give us feedback on what is the questions, also feedback on the learning program. And yeah, as you said, it's constant iteration and adjustment of what we've produced. Yeah.
And in those live sessions, you can target it to what's going on in the business or what's going on in the world, so you can make it relevant. But things like, I mean, communication is a human activity that always goes on, and we always have to do it. So that's a great example of something and it's a tool that will always be useful and always be important. So there's, and I've used it for many years, and it's always landed well. So that's a good, in terms of reinvention, that's a good example of not throwing the baby out with the bathwater, you know. So if it still works, keep using it, but keep questioning whether it still works.
Yeah. Thank you, Julian. Thank you, Phil. Thank you so much, everyone. That is the end of today. But if you can spare about 5 minutes to just, connect one more time, network, come to Phil, come to Julian. I'm also here. And on the tables, there are some mouse pads. Please take one. And there's just some content that you can have with you. Even at the back, there are papers, product descriptions that you can actually have with you and contact us later. So please take something with you. And we will also send some documents to your emails after this. Yeah.
Thank you.